Picture this. You open Spotify or Apple Music or whatever you use, and right there on your home screen is a playlist waiting for you. Discover weekly, daily, a mix. It's made just for you. And honestly, it's pretty good. Like, how does it even know you so well? It's pulling songs you forgot you loved, artists you've never searched for, but you immediately recognize. It feels personal, except it isn't. Because nobody sat down and actually thought about you. Nobody picked those songs because they know you. An algorithm looked at your data, found some patterns, and made some educated guesses. Now, imagine something completely different. Before streaming, before downloads, before CDs, people made mixtapes. You had to physically sit down with a cassette, hit record at the exact right moment, and choose every song by hand, one at a time. And it took forever. And you could only fit so many songs before the tape ran out, which meant every choice mattered. If someone made you a mixtape, it meant something. It meant that they were thinking about you specifically. They had to sit there and decide, does this song sound like them? Will they get this? Will they like this? Is this exactly what they need to hear right now? And really, it's just a playlist, but it's a mixtape. Now imagine if someone thought about you carefully when they made you. Every detail chosen on purpose by someone who was sincerely thinking about you the whole time. That's what we're going to talk about tonight. We're kicking off our series, You Be You, and tonight is the foundation for everything else. Before we get into labels, comparisons, or any of the other stuff that makes identity complicated, we have to start here. Because you weren't a random result or made by an algorithm. You weren't an accident. You weren't thrown together and just hoped for the best. You were made on purpose. But here's an honest question. Does that feel true to you? Because for a lot of us, it doesn't. Not all the time, perhaps not even most of the time. Maybe it's your body, the way you're built, the way you look at things, the things you would change if you could. Maybe it's a family situation, the circumstances you were born into, certainly you didn't choose. Maybe it's your personality, the parts of yourself that you have always felt like were more of a problem than a feature. Or maybe it's harder to name than any of that. Just a low-level feeling that you have running in the background, like you showed up to a party that you weren't even invited to. Or like everyone else got a version of themselves that makes sense, and you're still trying to figure out what you are supposed to be. This gap, the gap between you are made on purpose and what your life really looks like right now, that's real. And we're not going to skip past that. But here's where we are going. About 3,000 years ago, a guy named David wrote something that gets at exactly what we are talking about. David had a complicated life. He made real mistakes. He made himself and got into real trouble. And somewhere in the middle of all of that, he wrote about what it feels like to be known by a God who is personally, carefully involved in making him. So let's talk about David. Most of y'all know the big stuff, right? He's a shepherd boy, giant slayer, king of Israel. But what doesn't always make the highlight reel is how complicated David's life really was. He spent years running for his life. He made serious mistakes. He carried real guilt. He knew what it felt like for things to go sideways in ways he couldn't fix. And yet somewhere in the middle of all of that, David wrote Psalms 139. We don't know exactly when, but we do know that David wasn't writing from a place of having it all figured out. He was writing as someone fully known by a God who had been with him through all of it. The good seasons and the bad ones, the victories and the failures, all of it. Psalms 139 is not a theological argument. It's not a formal theological argument. Okay, it reads more like someone who is thinking out loud. It's David working through what it means to be made by a God who personally was involved in making him. So let's check out what David wrote tonight. Psalm 139. You made all the delicate inner parts of my body and knit me together in my mother's womb. Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. Your workmanship is marvelous. How well I know it. You watched me as I was being formed in utter seclusion, as I was woven together in the dark of the womb. You saw me before I was born. Every day of my life was recorded in your book. Every moment was laid out before a single day had passed. David is writing about formation, about being made. And the word he chose for how God made him is what? Did you catch it? A little four-letter word. Knit. He chose the word knit. And there's a reason we associate knitting with old people who have time on their hands. It's slow, unhurried, intentional work. One stitch at a time. The person holding the needles has a specific picture in mind of how and what they are going to make, right? The whole way through. And they're in no hurry to get there, right? You can't speed it up. You can't automate it. And that is the word that David chose. Not built, not manufactured, knit. The language of someone working carefully, particularly, patiently on something that matters. Think about any time you've ever built something with your hands. Maybe it was Legos. Maybe you actually built a deck or something like that. That satisfaction that you get when you are done creating, making it. This is what David's talking about. He also said that God formed him in utter seclusion. Utter seclusion. Before David had a name, before his parents had announced anything, before anyone in the world knew he existed, God already knew. God was already there, already paying attention. And then verse 16 takes it even further. Every day of David's life was written down before a single one of them ever happened. That's not just God being present at the beginning. That's God being invested in the whole story before it ever even started. Now, what you might not know is Psalm 139 is a song. And songs in Hebrew, their tradition, they were meant to be sung by the whole community, which means everything that David wrote about his own formation, he was writing about the people who would sing it after him. That includes us. Right? We're not just reading about David's experience from a distance. We're supposed to read this as our own. But that raises a question. If God was present and intentional in making David, what does that mean for the person sitting where you're sitting right now? What does that mean for you? Well, there are three things tonight, and I believe it starts with this. Number one, God knit you together on purpose. A lot of us, we are fine with the idea that God made people in general. Right? Sure, God created humanity. That's not a hard thing to believe. What's harder to actually believe, and not just to say, but actually believe, is that God made you specifically. That same intentionality David is describing wasn't just for David, it was for you. Think about the differences between a copy and paste, hey everyone, group message, versus a text that someone sent to you. You can tell the difference immediately, right? One is generic, the other feels like someone was actually thinking about you. That's the difference that David is pointing to. Those things, the things that make you, you, the way your brain works, the way things come naturally to you, the way that things don't, or even those things that you wish you could change, David is telling us those things were not accidents. They were choices made by someone who was thinking about you the whole time. Now that doesn't mean everything about your life is going to be easy or comfortable or even easy to explain. It doesn't mean difficult things aren't difficult, but it does mean that the person who made you knew exactly what they were doing. God knit you together on purpose. The second thing is this: you were made to reflect something bigger. David isn't just saying that he was made carefully. He's saying he was made by God. And anything made by God carries something of God in it. It comes, if you come from God, you reflect God. But most of us, we aren't starting there. Most of us spend our time and our energy trying to figure out who we are. And most of that effort starts in the same place, looking inside of us. We ask questions like, who am I? What do I like? How do I feel? What's my personality type? We treat identity like something we have to figure out on our own, build from scratch, and then hold together through sheer effort. But here's what's exhausting about that. If your identity is something that you have to figure out on your own, it's also something that you can lose. One bad day, one failure, one moment where everything goes sideways and suddenly you're not sure who you are anymore. And honestly, most of us have been there. Paul, writing to the church in Ephesus, offers a completely different starting point. Check this out, Ephesians chapter 2, verse 10. For we are God's masterpiece. He has created us anew in Christ Jesus so we can do the good things he planned for us long ago. Paul called them a masterpiece. What is a masterpiece? Something that is crafted and created with design and a purpose already in mind. The kind of thing someone makes when they care deeply about the outcome. And notice the question that Paul is answering here. It isn't who am I? It's whose am I? You are God's masterpiece. God created you, which means the search for identity doesn't start by looking inward. It starts by looking at who made you. And that foundation doesn't collapse when things get difficult. And now here's what makes all of that possible. Number 3, being fully known doesn't have to be scary. Most of us have a strong instinct to hide. If someone knew everything about us, every embarrassing moment, every thought, we would be mortified to say out loud everything we've done that we hope nobody ever finds out about. We'd want to disappear Because in our experience, being seen feels like a risk. Like, what if they find out who I really am and decide that I'm not worth it? But Psalm 139 is saying that's already the situation. God already knows every word before it leaves your mouth, every day before you live it. God was present in the earliest moments of your formation, foundation, before you existed as anything more than just a thought. Before you had a name, a voice, or any awareness of yourself at all, God was already paying attention. And David isn't the only one who heard this. Centuries before Jesus was born, God said something to a guy named Jeremiah that stops Jeremiah in his tracks. Check this out, Jeremiah 1, verse 5. God says, I knew you before I formed you in your mother's womb. Before you were born, I set you apart and appointed you as my prophet to the nations. Jeremiah's first response was basically to tell God, God, you got the wrong person. He was saying he didn't think he had what it took, but God's point wasn't, here's what I need from you, Jeremiah. It was, here's what I already know about you. I knew you. Before you existed, before you had a chance to prove anything or fail at anything, I already knew you. And here's what that means for the version of you that you'd rather nobody saw. The one that shows up when you're at your worst. The one that's made mistakes that you'd never say out loud. God is not surprised by that version. God knew it was coming before you took your first breath. And God still decided that you were worth making. All right, David had plenty to hide. And he still invited God to look close. That kind of response only comes from someone who has figured out something most of us are still working on. That being fully known and fully loved, they're not in conflict with each other. For God, they go together. And if that's true, it changes everything about how you see yourself. So the question is, what does that look like in real life? Yeah, Pastor Si, that's fine. Psalm 139, it's old. I'm not even paying attention anyway. What does that mean for me right now in real life? Well, let's talk about what it looks like in real life. The first is this. You need to personalize Psalm 139. What does that mean to personalize something? There you go. Make it yours. Take Psalm 139, verses 13 through 16 that we read, and rewrite it to make it personal. That's why you have blanks on the back of your sheet for you to do this. Write it as if David is handing you the pen and asking you to write about yourself specifically. Personal, honest, yours. And then when you have done that, read it out loud to God. All right, David wrote this as a song. It was meant to be spoken, not just studied. So say it, right? It doesn't have to be polished or sound like poetry, right? There's no grade on this. No one is making you turn this in. There's no version of this that's too simple or too short. The only thing that matters is that it's about you and how you say it to God. And if you're stuck on a project like this, try finishing this sentence. You could write this down too. God, you made me with, and then you keep going from there. Even a few lines of you being genuine is worth more than the most beautifully crafted prayer that has nothing to do with your actual life. Personalize Psalm 139. The second thing, invite God into a new area of your life. David ended Psalm 139 by inviting God to search him. He spent the whole psalm sitting with the reality that God already knew everything about him, and his response was to lean into that than rather away from it, to open a door rather than keep it shut. So think about an area of your life where God hasn't really had that much access to, that you've tried to keep hidden. Maybe it's something that you've figured out completely on your own, or it's an area that you're not still sure you believe God was intentional in making you the way you are. Maybe it's something that you'd rather not look at too closely. Whatever it is, specifically invite God in. By name, out loud. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't need to clean it up before you bring it to God. The invitation itself is the step. And it's enough to start with that. The third thing is this. Thank God for how he made you. Think about one specific thing about how you are wired that you've never stopped to ask or thank God for. A personality trait, the way you see the world, something that's just always been there, and thank God for it. Out loud, specifically. That's what Psalm 139 is really pointing toward. David didn't just describe what it felt like to be known by God. He responded to it. Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. That response is not automatic. That's not a normal human response. It was a choice, and it's the same choice that is right in front of you right now. You don't have to feel it fully to say it honestly. Start with one thing. Say it out loud, and let that be enough, and let gratitude begin to take hold instead of negativity. And now here's what I want you to hold on to as you head into small groups. That you came here tonight carrying some version of that gap that we talked about at the beginning. That space between God made me on purpose and whatever my life really feels like right now. Right? That gap is real. But so is everything that we looked at in Psalm 139 tonight. God was there before you existed. God was paying attention before you had a name, and God still decided you were worth making exactly as you are. That's the foundation of the whole series, and we're going to build on that.